News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. There's your closing bell for this Wednesday on Wall Street, where stocks surged the most in about 5 years after President Trump said he would pause some tariffs on dozens of countries. And we're going to have all of that in just a moment. Let's bring you those closing numbers. We do it each day here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 gained 9.5%. That's 474 points. NASDAQ gained 1,857 points. That's more than 12%. The Dow is up 7.8%. That is 2,961 points. And the 10-year Treasury yield is at 4.31%. The 2-year yield at 3.88%. President Trump took to social media to announce the 90-day pause on tariffs for non-retaliating countries, saying that he will also lower the reciprocal tariffs to 10%. The pause applies to reciprocal and across-the-board 10% tariffs, and it takes effect immediately. President Trump says he decided on the pause because countries were getting uneasy.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
At the same time, the president says he's raising tariffs on China to 125% over its refusal to negotiate. The president had previously imposed a 104% charge on Chinese imports. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent at the White House talked about how the negotiations helped influence the move.
These are trade negotiations, but if countries want to come and offer other things, I talked about yesterday that we are thinking about a big LNG project in Alaska. But again, in essence, that is trade because it will decrease the trade deficit that we have with those countries.
Bessent says some of the countries that wanted to deal with the U.S. are closest to China.
What we will see is some of the very early countries are China's neighbors. China is the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and they are the biggest source of the U.S. trade problem.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The Fed minutes from March focused on tariffs and stagflation. Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
Facing an economy that was slowing but still growing with sticky inflation and a relatively solid labor market, it's no surprise that Fed officials spent most of their March 19th meeting discussing tariffs. Stagflation was on their mind with, quote, almost all participants viewing risks to inflation as tilted to the upside and risks to employment tilted to the downside.
Bloomberg's Mike McKee. The Fed slowed the pace of reducing its balance sheet. Some officials disagreed with that. The move has led some strategists to push out their expectations for how long the runoff will continue. More demand than expected for the 10-year Treasury auction. Bloomberg's Ira Jersey.
The market cheapened up enough that investors came in like bandits. In fact, this was 88% was taken by investors. And that's, if that's not a record, it's very darn close to a record. All the cheapening that occurred recently was in a way to make room for this auction.
Bloomberg's Ira Jersey says this also throws some cold water on the idea that treasuries are not seen as safe haven assets anymore. That also sent stocks higher. Amazon has canceled orders for multiple products made in China and other Asian countries. That, according to a document reviewed by Bloomberg and others familiar with the matter. Bloomberg's Spencer Soper says these cancellations impact direct import orders.
This is where Amazon tells vendors, hey, look, you're making this stuff in China or some other country in Asia. We can actually transport it to the U.S. cheaper than you can because we do so much volume. Why don't you let us just buy it from you in the source country? We'll import it, we'll pay the tariffs, and pass those savings on to customers. That makes a lot of sense previously.
Spencer Soper speaking with Bloomberg Intelligence. Soper says this move suggests the company is reducing its exposure to tariffs imposed by the president. Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari says the central bank is less likely to lower interest rates in the face of tariffs. Kashkari believes the tariffs will lower investment and economic growth, then push up inflation, making it harder to cut interest rates, even if the economy is getting weaker. Federal judges in New York and Texas temporarily blocked the Trump administration's bid to deport alleged Venezuelan gang members. The judges ruled the government cannot immediately deport men being held in detention facilities in their regions. The orders are set to expire later this month as the judges decide whether to impose longer-term halts on deportations. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.